Hello, my friends. Welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. So, my friends, on Capitol Hill earlier last week, or this week, I suppose, I'm getting my times are mixed up because, again, it is the weekend, and during the weekend, you tend to relax your brain. But over the past week, Democrats have been pushing heavily this new quote unquote bipartisan bill, which would expand background checks to for gun purchases to private sellers. The Hill is reporting, this came from a few days ago, Senator Chris Murphy reintroduced legislation to expand federal background checks on all gun sales on Tuesday. The Background Check Expansion Act is co-sponsored by 43 Senate Democrats, including Schumer, of course Schumer, and would require unlicensed or private sellers to conduct a background check prior to transferring a firearm. So the premise of this bill is that A, background checks are important, and B, there is a danger posed to society or a danger posed by not having background checks conducted during private or unlicensed sales. My friends, when we're trying to get to the truth, because in my opinion, all political calculations should be corresponding to the truth. Because if political calculations, at least in America, are not corresponding to the truth, at the very least, you are violating the founding vision of this country, which all senators and congresspeople put their hand on the Bible or on some other official document and pledge to uphold, or at the very most, if you're not violating America solely, what you're doing is you're violating the pursuit of good policy. Good policy should not be predicated on falsehoods. Good policy should be predicated on the facts, and it should be predicated on sound reasoning. My friends, it is not an example of sound reasoning to say the mere act of not having the government stamp on a certain transaction means that that transaction could potentially lead to danger. That's a non sequitur. It's the same idea that says if the government does not sanction it, it must be less legitimate. It presupposes that legitimacy and safety come from the machinery of bureaucratic regulations ensnaring certain things. So the very premise, the foundational premise of the Democrats' move to try to expand background checks to private sellers, which could be, just so we can understand here, a private gun seller can be someone as simple as your mom giving you the family gun and passing it down. You can pass it down to your children. That could be a private gun sale, and they want to have the federal government involved in those transactions. And in my opinion, there is a serious question as to why the federal government should be involved in any private transaction in the first place. But the status quo right now is we have background checks for licensed gun dealers, and that's status quo. We can talk about that later, but still, I do not see the pertinent need to get the government involved in my private transactions, especially when the empirical data has shown that in almost every major school shooting of the past few years, they have not been obtained from private or unlicensed gun sellers. Some have, many haven't. So I won't say the name of the shooters, but in the majority Stoneman Douglas shooting, which created the March for Our Lives movement, the shooter had an AR-15 rifle. He got that legally from a licensed gun dealer. He obtained it legally. Legally. It says right here that the shooter, I will not say his name. You can read it if you want to. I will not say his name. Lawfully bought the semi-automatic rifle last February, according to Peter Forcelli, a special agent in charge of the Miami office of Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco. Legally. The shooter at the South Carolina church got his weapon. Well, legally. In fact, the FBI had a warning that this guy was a dangerous person. And, they say, well, we didn't have access to information. No, the FBI, as this article here says, had the resources to stop this guy, but they didn't stop this guy. The authorities knew about this Florida shooter, but they didn't stop him. My friends, I don't care how many bureaucratic machinery you try to put over certain things. If the people who are arming the machinery themselves are incompetent, then my friends, you will not have efficient actions. The laws become like redundant, sterile tools that just sit there to give us the aesthetic appearance comfortability, the aesthetic appearance of being, of feeling cozy, when in all reality, many of the people who are running these machines, who are running these metrics, are themselves somewhat incompetent. That's not to say that all law enforcement are incompetent. That's obviously be an overstatement. But in many of the past, and these are just two examples, but in many of the past few shootings across the past decade, the reason the shooter was able to do what he did was not because mommy gave him a gun, although there have been instances of guns being left out in the home and people taking those guns shooting people, but it's because these people were not, there were red flags and they were not stopped. So if you really want to affect the gun problem, quote unquote, in America, I don't think it really is a problem. I think that we have a higher population density, and we have a country that's predicated upon the right to bear arms. And in that circumstance, you're going to have much more people wielding arms, and therefore you'll have more incidences with those weapons. Just as if you have a country that has banned guns, you'll still have rapes and violent crime like they have in London, but they'll do it through other means. The knife attacks are up all over the UK. So, I mean, it doesn't, the tool is not what matters. It's the violent principle that animates the action of the perpetrator. But even if I assume it's the tool that matters, we already have the legislative infrastructure to take down violent people, but the government does not use it. Why? This is one of the many reasons why I'm not confident in the government's ability to effectively legislate these things and to protect my rights in the process of their sanctimonious legislation. But my friends, there's a bigger issue here. There's a bigger issue in this gun control debate. Not only is the premise of this bill false, but the premise of gun control itself is fundamentally false. My friends, I am a Second Amendment absolutist. Your rights are inviolable, or they are not rights whatsoever, they are privileges. If someone can violate your rights or amend your rights, they are not rights, they are privileges. Your rights emanate from a divine source that is external to your being and external to your life, and they emerge into a social context to help you live righteously and morally responsible. So you can't, to amend rights, and to amend one of the basic rights, our right to self-preservation, which is enshrined that Lockean trifecta of life, liberty, and property, the first rung on that ladder. To try to take that away, or to try to amend that, is for you or for the government to suggest they have dominion over my life, even when I'm not committing an action that puts me in direct conflict with other people's lives or other people's rights. It is for the government to transcend their proper role. It is for the government to assume a certain paternalistic attitude towards me and to try to dictate and reorient my natural right to life. The premise of gun control is fundamentally false. The premise the government has the ability or the right or the imprimatur to come in and hijack my ability to preserve myself is fundamentally incorrect. And even if you think I can preserve myself effectively through other means, having a weapon and being trained at the weapon is obviously one of the most efficient, if not the most efficient means of preserving your life in the face of the modern era where guns, firearms, and other kind of things naturally abound. So my friends, this conversation is not about how can we save lives. This conversation is about how can the government and how can certain forces in society legislate your private dealings and usurp your voluntary association and your voluntary transactions. And again, sanctions have the same kind of principle. Sanctions, what they do, sanctions go in and they try to usurp your voluntary transaction with other countries. This is a different kind of menace. It's the same genre, different form. Same genre, different form. This is about your ability to trade privately and freely with someone else who you know. This is about your ability to preserve your life in an effective way. This is about the government's incompetence in being able to solve these issues by themselves with existing laws which already prove effective to their ends, and therefore relying on more laws, more bureaucracy, more machinery to fix an issue who is at the very root. It does not have the problem of guns. At the very root, this issue is not the problem of guns. At the very root, it's a problem of values, a problem of mental illnesses and chemical imbalances, a problem of a lack of love. These are emotional and spiritual problems that cannot be rectified by an act of Congress. In fact, it would take more than an act of Congress to rectify the mental health crisis in America. It would take more than an act of Congress to fix these things, my friends. So let me leave you with this. Gun control advocates tend to assume that we can fix these issues by attacking individuals who act lawfully and who act peacefully, and that is a false assumption for the reasons I explained. If you really want to address the problem of crime, of violent crime, not just gun crime, but all violent crime in America, then you need to look at the root cause of those problems and not look at the symptom that is oftentimes used to manifest the root cause of those problems. Because when you attack the root cause of those problems, the symptoms become impotent. Think on it. As always, my brothers and sisters, I love you. And if you want to support my channel, please. I have a Patreon now. It is patreon.com/officialcwatson. That is patreon.com/officialcwatson. I would appreciate your support. I also have a PayPal, which is officialcwatson@gmail.com. Regardless, my friends, though, I love you and please stay pensive. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this message, please be sure to support my channel through PayPal. My PayPal is @officialcwatson, as you see on the screen. Any amount helps. Thank you so much and stay pensive.